thanks for joining us today. This is our ANZAC Day themed service, and I think it's important for us to take some time to honor those who have served our country. We often will talk about the sacrifice soldiers have made when they've given their life for the country, but today my angle is more on honoring those who survived, who have served their country and lived to tell the tale. Easter wasn't that long ago, and a very common Christian message around Easter is appreciating that Jesus came and sacrificed his life for us. He died on the cross and we honor the sacrifice. But as I've mentioned to our congregation times before, is that a very new church way of observing Easter is actually honoring the life Jesus led, that life of daily perfection, and yes, the death too, but it's a lot harder to be perfect every day, day in and day out for 33 years than it is to die on the cross. You know, it's would you take a bullet for your spouse, your child, your friend, whatever? Okay, but would you be perfect day in and day out for them? It's a lot more difficult, right? To love those who hate you, to do all those things, that's hard. So when we look at this service today, I want to take a look at the people who have had to endure even more than just giving their life. It's a very difficult task. The one act of death can be seen as like a glorious martyrdom, but it's that daily perfection that's really hard. So anyway, that's the point of the service, to look at those who have served in wars and not died. Because they go off, and a lot of times they don't come back the same. They do not come back the same. They have seen things in war that you can't unsee. As I was poking around for is there a video I could show as an interlude or something like that, and it's just like, there are a lot of terrible things out there. And it's like, no, I'm not going to show those here today, because even we can't unsee some of these things. So that's the point, is that there are soldiers out there who have gone out, come back, and they didn't just see these things on a video. They experienced it firsthand, and they can't unsee it. They can't unsee it in their minds. Came across this one story, and I'll read it for you. And the setup is that he is describing an assault on a sniper who was in a fishing shack. And this sniper was up there, he's picking off various soldiers in his company. And this guy's name is Mr. Manchester, and it says Manchester was terrified by fear. And he's got to go in and take out this sniper. He's terrified by fear, but he broke into this fishing shack and found himself in an empty room. There was another door, and as he wants to break that down, he's fearful like what's on the other side of this door. He feared the sniper would kill him, but he broke the door down anyway, and sure enough, there was the sniper in the room. But it turned out the sniper was in a harness, right? He's attached to his gun so he can be very precise with his movements and his targeting. And because he's in the sniper harness, the sniper couldn't turn around fast enough to shoot Manchester. So Manchester said, well, I shot him with my pistol. And he says, I remember clearly that I instantly felt remorse and shame. I can remember myself whispering foolishly, I'm sorry, and then just throwing up. I threw up all over myself. It was a betrayal of everything of what I've been taught since I was a child. The horrors of war aren't just the sacrifice of money and convenience. So he's like Zach and many of us who raised around, you don't kill, you don't murder, you don't do these things. Here he was. He did it, and now he has this huge guilt. Even despite the fact that this is a sniper who is killing off his friends. Right? This is the horror of war. He did what was right in the situation. He knows it. He knows he did what we had to do, but he still feels this sense of betrayal against those doctrines of love others and love your enemies and all the stuff that we teach here. The unfortunate thing about the stories, that's not uncommon. It's just not uncommon. The memories, they don't go away, and these guys have to live with them for the rest of their lives. The media is, I don't know if it's the media, but somebody has declared that we don't call it just shell shock. It's now PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. They try to treat it. They have therapies. They have drugs. They do all these things, but the stats are really alarming. If you look at the stats from the wars fought in the past 20 years, there are more people who commit suicide from wars today than there ever were for World War II or Vietnam.
Yeah.
What's going on here, folks? You know, what's going on here? I mean, the guilt, the shame, you know, it's tough on these fellas. And there's not a lot you and I can do about it, but one thing we can do is to honor the service that they've given and support them when they do come back. And when we give them the medals, it's us saying, you know what, we know you did a tough job, and thank you for doing it. We know you had to witness horrible things. We know you had to do things that you probably were uncomfortable with. Thanks for doing these things. When we look at the teachings for the new church, you know, there are some comforting passages that say that people like Manchester and others shouldn't feel bad about the service that they've given, even though they do. Put in your order of service a quote from Doctrine of Charity, and here's what it says. It says, charity in the case of the common soldier is the title of it. It says, if he, the soldier, looks to the Lord and shuns evil as sins, and does his duty honestly, justly, and faithfully, he becomes charity. There being in this respect no distinction of persons, for he is averse to unjust plunderings. He detests unjust bloodshed. In battle, it is another thing though. Then he is not averse to it, for then he does not think of it, but of the enemy as an enemy who desires his blood. His fury dies away when he hears the sound of the drum calling him, and the cease from the slaughter. Now that sounds okay. You know, he's averse to unjust plunderings, okay. But in battle, it's a different story. This isn't the story that Manchester tells, is it? It's hard to make that switch from soldier to civilized person and back and forth. Okay, it's battle. Go out and do all these terrible things. Okay, battle's over. Okay, back to normal life. It's hard to do. It's hard to do. Those emotions and those feelings just don't go away quickly. But this is what the writers are telling us the common soldier should be like. This is what charity in the common soldier is. And we don't often appreciate how hard it is to switch between those two modes. It says, after victory, he looks upon the prisoners as the neighbor, according to the quality of their good. Before battle, he raises his mind to the Lord and commends his life into his hand. And after having done this, he brings his mind down again from its elevation into the body and becomes brave. And while in his mind above his bravery, the thought of the Lord continues to abide, though he's not even aware of it. And then if he dies in the Lord. If he lives in the Lord. I think it's overall a comforting teaching, but it's just really hard to switch back and forth between these two modes. I mean, just if we think about it in terms of our lives, like none of us here have had to shoot somebody in war, right? None of us have had to do that. But we've all had experiences of things that we've done 20, 30, maybe 40 years ago that you still feel guilty about, right? You know, you were a jerk to somebody. Okay, that wasn't very nice of you. Oh, you feel embarrassed about how you treated somebody years ago. Okay, but you didn't have to kill them, right? You didn't have to do that. And so, for these soldiers, you know, it's one thing to forgive somebody of the act in our hearts, but can they do it for themselves? Can they deal with the fact they were so up close and personal? You know, the guy's in the fishing shack. It's you or me. It's you or me. One of us is going to go, but he had to do it. It's necessary. It's part of combat. But it's also hard to come back to your humanity after you feel like you've lost it. we don't often hear about the humanity of war. We hear about the brutality of war and the bad sides of it. But there are humans involved in these conflicts. And as a result, we lose a bit of our humanity in the process. I know they're doing their jobs. They sign up for these things a lot of times. In the Western world, going into service is voluntary, right? So there's something to be said about, do these young men know what they're signing up for? That's part of, I think, what a service like this can do is say, well, yeah, you may think this sounds like fun, but is it really? When I was looking through the scripture, I thought, well, okay, I need to find a story that helps to illustrate this point. And where in the Bible do we see wars? Well, wars are everywhere in the Bible, right? They're everywhere. But most of the wars you see in the Bible, it's told from a high level. Well, the Israelites went out and struck the Philistines, or the Philistines struck the Israelites. It's not that one-on-one kind of thing. But there is one story from 2 Samuel chapter 2. And this is after King Saul has died, and there's this civil war erupting in the land because, well, who's going to be the next king? Is it going to be David the mighty warrior, or is it going to be Saul's son? Well, that's how this picks up, as the two sides fight over who's going to be the next king. So there's this division. David's from the south, the Judah side of things, and so the people from Judah want David to be the king. And on the north, people want Saul's son to be the king because, hey, why is this guy from the Judah going to care about us? So here you have this conflict, and we have two commanders. Joab is David's from the south, and Abner, who's the northern commander. So that's the big key thing here. Abner, the northern commander, Joab on the south. And so here we go. Here's our story. There was a very fierce battle that day, and Abner and the men of Israel were beaten before the servants of David. Now the three sons of Zeruiah were these: Joab, so the commander of the south, Joab, and Abishai, and Asahel. And Asahel was as fleet on foot as a wild gazelle. He's really fast. So Asahel pursued Abner, commander of the north, and in going, he did not turn to the right hand or to the left from following Abner. Then Abner looked behind him and said, "Are you Asahel?" He answered, "I am." And Abner said to him, "Turn aside to your right hand or to your left. Lay hold on one of the young men and take his armor for yourself." But Asahel would not turn aside from following him. So Abner said to him again, "Turn aside from following me. Why should I strike you to the ground? How could I then face your brother Joab, commander of the south?" However, he refused to turn aside, and therefore Abner struck him in the stomach with the blunt end of the spear. So the spear came out his back, and he fell down there and died on the spot. So it was that as many came to the place where Asahel fell down and died, stood still. Joab and Abishai also pursued Abner. The sun was going down when they came to the hill of Amnah, which is before Gael, by the road on the wilderness to Gibeon. Now the children of Benjamin gathered together behind Abner and became a unit, and they took their stand on top of the hill. Then Abner called Joab and said, "Shall the sword devour forever? Do you not know that it will be bitter in the latter? Do you know that it will be bitter in the latter end? How long will it be then until you tell the people to return from pursuing their brethren?" Right, notice what Abner's doing here. He's trying to call a timeout. Do you see that this isn't going to end well, guys? Can we all just stop? Why are we fighting? We are family in the end, right? We're all the same family. And Joab said, "As God lives, unless you had spoken, surely then by morning all the people would have given up pursuing their brethren." So Joab blew a trumpet, and all the people stood still and did not pursue Israel anymore, nor did they fight anymore. This interaction between Asahel and Abner is really powerful when you think about the depth of what's going on here. He's the commander. He's running away. Asahel is just too fast for him. He's just too fast. But Abner's like, look, don't make me kill you. Don't make me kill you. How am I going to face your brother, the opposing commander, who's also, extended family, really, because they're all in the same country. So Abner's trying to make this switch from warrior to human. All right? They had this connection. Both Asahel, Abner, Joab, they used to all serve David at one point. So they do have, a real connection. But Asahel won't give up. So Abner has to do what he has to do. So then when Abner's being pursued again, he says to Joab, why? But can't we just stop this? Can't we just stop this? It's crazy. And to Joab's credit, he says, yeah, you're right. You're right. We can stop. It's not easy. It's not easy to do this, to switch back and forth. But they do it. And so this is kind of an illustration of why we're honoring the soldiers who come back from war and can be human. Because it's not hard, it's not easy to do. This story shows that you can make the switch. Abner tries to make this switch and he succeeds. But as the story continues to go, we find that Joab can't. Joab doesn't succeed. Joab is so furious that Abner has killed his brother, he does a sneak attack and kills Abner. David later finds out about this and says, whoa, this is wrong, I did not sanction this, makes a big apology saying, hey, I am not responsible for Abner's death. I had told Joab to rein it in. But this is just showing that for as much as Abner could go back to being a human in his war mode, Joab couldn't. He couldn't escape the revenge, the hatred, the murder. It's like the stench of war had just really gotten all over him, and there was nothing he could do but just stick with it. There are times in life, whether battlefield or in our personal life, where we have to fight. But it has its consequences. So I'm going to read you this quote from True Christianity, because it tells us that loving our country is really important. And there are times when soldiers have to fight. It's important to love our country. But there's a toll that comes with it. This is True Christianity 4:14. It says, our country is our neighbor more than our community is, because our country consists of many communities. Love for our country is therefore broader and higher. Loving our country is also loving the well-being of the general public. Our country is our neighbor because it's like a parent. We are born into it. It has nourished us and continues to nourish us. It has kept us safe from harm and continues to do so. We are to do good to our country with love according to what it needs. Some of its needs are earthly and some of it are spiritual. Its earthly needs center on civic life and order. Its spiritual needs center on its spiritual life and order. We are to love our country not merely as much as we love ourselves, but we are to love it more. There is a law written on the human heart that gives rise to the statement that all just people say when they are in imminent danger of dying because of an enemy or some other cause. They say it is a noble thing to die for their country. They say it is a glorious thing for soldiers to shed their blood for their country. They say this because it is how much one ought to love one's country. It's important to know that if people love their country and benefit, they wish it well and they love the Lord's kingdom after death. The Lord's kingdom is their country at that point. And those who love the Lord's kingdom love the Lord, since the Lord is everything to all in his kingdom. So, we're to love our country. And there are people who think it's glorious to die for their country. But what we are not factoring or not seeing in this passage is that there are people who go to war, they survive, and they come back. And we can forget that that's a pretty big deal too. It's a pretty big deal to come back. We don't always account for their difficulty in assimilating back to this life. So, with that in mind, I'm going to wrap this up with one final story. It's about a man named Roger. Roger served in Vietnam, and it's an encounter between him and a woman who was a World War II widow. And one of the things that I've read when researching for this week was that the importance of these veterans getting medals and the recognition from society in some way, because it gives them the support and the validation for what they've done and helps them assimilate back into normal society. It helps them feel like, well, it eases their guilt, I guess is what it gets down to. It's easing their burden. So, yeah, here's the story. And when I read this, you're going to catch that this is what Roger is struggling with, is struggling to re-assimilate. It's told from the perspective of third person who's observing this interaction. And he says, there's this vet who comes by named Roger. And he's down at the bar, and this older woman begins to verbally attack him. She says, "You've got no right to snivel about your little war. World War II was a real war. Were you even alive then? I lost a brother and a husband in World War II." I tried to ignore her. She was only a local character, but Roger had had enough. He looked at her calmly, coldly, and said, "Have you ever had to kill anyone?" "Well, no," she answered belligerently. "Then what right have you got to tell me anything?" There was a long, painful silence throughout the hall, as would occur in a home where a guest had just witnessed an embarrassing family argument. Then I asked quietly, "Roger, when you just got pushed now, you came back with the fact that you had to kill in Vietnam. Was that the worst of it for you?" "Yeah, that's half of it. I waited for a very long time, but he didn't go on. He only stared into his beard. Finally, I had to ask, what was the other half?" He said, "The other half was that when we got home, nobody understood."